It's not all that often in Unsung Heroes that we talk about speed record vehicles. We do it occasionally, but it doesn't tend to be all that often because A, you pretty much know what they're going to do. Go very fast in a straight line or fail at going very fast in a straight line. Plus, a lot of speed record vehicles are not particularly well known. It tends to be maybe 3 to 5 of them that everybody has heard of, such as the Thrust SSC, and then a lot of the lower level cars, even if they were record setters in their class, tend to get forgotten for the most part. But that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to point out this one in particular, because I think there are two interesting things that really jumped out at me about this particular car. One is that it is a Russian, or more accurately at the time, Soviet speed record car, which is interesting. We don't talk about cars from Eastern Europe all that often, and especially in the West, I think there are some which we could actually do well to consider more, because there are some pretty cool little ones, some oddball ones, and that definitely ties in to the purpose of this series. Oddball is welcome here. The second reason is a much more personal one to me, and that is that this is indeed a turbine-powered speed record car. And interestingly, although as far as I could find the car never actually achieved this, it was intended that this was not only used as a speed record car, but also as a race car. Now, I may be wrong, but as I said, I couldn't find any evidence of that actually happening, but this car was not a failure, which once again is all the more reason why it deserves to be better known. Now, this is one of those vehicles that you'll often see pop up in a Google search if you're looking for some other speed record vehicle. It's got a pretty distinctive colour. It does kind of look Eastern European. It's a little bit bland. The colour isn't exactly the flashiest thing around. It doesn't really have a livery to speak of. And even visually, it looks like a big speed record car. It looks similar to the Audi Type C Streamliner from the 30s, albeit with a further back cockpit arrangement, a closed cockpit at that, and maybe a little bit more of a crude looking body. Almost as if it was somebody's own interpretation of a 30s Streamliner. And in some ways, that's not necessarily inaccurate, because this was a custom vehicle from the ground up, not based on an existing car, and it actually has 2 turbine engines. Now, the Pioneer 2M was actually finished in 1961, so it comes a long time after those German Silver Arrow races, if you will, and the speed record cars from Auto Union, etc. But those 2 engines are interesting because, of course, being a turbine, they're going to give you certain things as a guarantee. They're going to be very loud, they're going to rev very high, probably produce a healthy amount of torque, and give you very good speed, more often than not, even if you don't have great aerodynamics. So if you put that into a car which does have good aerodynamics, well, that could really turn the tide for a vehicle between success and failure. Now, these turbines were not particularly large, because here's the thing. This car is not as big as you'd think. It weighs less than 500 kilos. This is an extremely small vehicle, and you can actually see it in some shots in a museum next to other Soviet cars, and it is tiny. This car can barely fit the driver from the looks of things, and as I said, you do have 2 turbine engines, and they are located to the left and to the right of the driver. Pretty precarious place to be, but also gives you good weight distribution as well. Now, those turbines, in terms of the spec, are wildly all over the place when it comes to Google. If you were to go to Wikipedia, for instance, well, that will tell you that each of those turbines put out 800 horsepower apiece. No, they didn't. In fact, it wasn't even close. If you go instead to SovietSportsCars.Russia, that is actually much more accurate to what I would expect an engine of this type and age and size to be putting out, because according to that site and the relatively crude translation on there, these engines actually put out more like 100 horsepower each. Now, that may seem disappointing in comparison, but the thing that you need to remember is that this was not going for an outright speed record. It was going very specifically for a Group 8 speed record, which is specifically for turbine-powered vehicles. And here's the thing, you might not have heard of it before, but it was a success. In fact, between 1961 and 1972, the Pioneer 2M broke 13 speed records, not just in Russia or for Russian vehicles, but worldwide speed records in multiple classes, because originally it weighed, as I said, under 500 kilos, partially thanks to its small size. Turbine engines are very small and light as well. The body is aluminum, which helps also. but they actually made it heavier and also more powerful over time in order to allow it to compete in multiple categories within the turbine setup. So originally it was the under 500 kilo class, as I said, 100 horsepower per engine at 50,000 RPM apiece. So in other words, about 200 horsepower. Technically combined it's still 50,000 RPM, but I like to think of it as being 100,000. And the car being so light and so aerodynamic meant that it was very fast. And according to the specs that I could find, which once again are all over the place, depending on where you look, it seems that the highest speed that this car achieved was a very respectable 194 miles per hour, which doesn't sound that great for a car with 2 turbine engines that weighs less than half a ton, but the thing that you've got to remember is it's only got 200 horsepower. And even in its highest tuned form, once again according to SovietSportsCars.Russia, even in that most powerful form, you're still only looking at 320 horses. That is not very much, especially by the 60s standard. So to do 194 miles an hour from that, that's actually really impressive. Now, incidentally, the car was actually built under the guidance and even piloted by a race driver, of course a Soviet driver, by the name of Ilya Alexandrovich Tikhomarov. And good on the guys and girls behind this vehicle because it's an achievement. It's one which deserves more recognition than it has. It's a car which is hugely significant for the Soviet Union at the time, but even just for Russia's history to this day. And it was, suffice it to say, the fastest Russian vehicle ever built up until that time. Or the fastest car, I should say. Not vehicle, period, of course. But as far as this episode goes, I do want to say what I would usually say at the start of the video, which is, of course, if you did enjoy this episode, then jump over to the Discord server below and you can actually vote for your favourite episodes of this entire series. And then when we hit the 100th episode, I'm going to be counting down the top 10 community choice picks of your favourite unsung heroes. So if you like this car, jump on over there, give it some votes, and also, of course, vote for others that you like as well. But to me, this is a car which definitely, of course, deserves more attention. I love the fact that it is this wacky, super lightweight, tiny little speed record car, which typically is not the way they are. Usually, most of the speed record cars that we know of tend to be very big, with full-size, jet engines sticking out the back. This is surprisingly modest, especially for a Soviet car, actually. The twin-turbine engine, of course, appeals to me. The records are fantastic, and they should be proud of the car, especially considering that, as I said, it was a ground-up creation specifically designed for just that. So overall, that's it for this installment. Of course, if you want to check out other episodes of Unsung Heroes before you go to vote on your favourites, then click the playlist right here on screen. And until then, I'll see you next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.